Good evening, everyone. My name is David Maxwell, and I have the pleasure and honor of serving as principal at Valley High School. Also, who are going to be helping me with tonight's presentation is principal at Valley Southwoods, Mitch Cooner, director of curriculum, teaching and learning at the LRC, director Shane Scott, as well as an associate principal at Valley High School, Dr. Jeff Grassmeyer. Dr. Grassmeyer, let me ask you this. Can you see when people, can you see, you can't see the waiting room, can you?
I cannot, nope.
Okay, so I'm going to be doing kind of a double feature here, and that is watching the waiting room and allowing people in. So real quick, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be joining us tonight as we are going to have just a discussion and presentation around next year's potential schedule. Now, first of all, I want to apologize because if you look closely, I actually have 3 screens on the Zoom meeting. And I think it was when I updated my account today to allow for more than 100 people to be a part of the meeting. We wanted to make sure that everybody who wanted to be a part was able to be a part. So I did some adjustments to my account today, and I think it made things a little funky. So I have 3 people on the Zoom meeting tonight. So just want to say sorry about that. Okay. Tell you what, we do have, like I said, I'm watching the waiting room. We have some people who are joining us, and I'm going to try to keep my eye on that as well as people are joining. So first of all, the pandemic has created such an interesting situation, and that is, we decided very late in the summer last year, as we were thinking about mitigation protocols and trying to keep students and staff safe, that we wanted to try to provide a schedule which allowed that to happen, which kept kids out of the hallways necessarily, as well as minimize a lot of traffic during passing periods. And so it was at that time that district leadership and building administrators came up with the idea of creating a block schedule, which would just rotate day to day. It would allow us to have 4 periods one day and then 4 periods the next day. So it was an odd, even schedule, and it just continually rotated. There was no day was ever the same. No week was ever the same. So in one week, teachers might see their kids 2 times a week, and other weeks they would see them 3 times a week. So as we continued this year, we just started thinking, okay, is this something that we want to continue? We should look at a model and a schedule which best supports our kids and best supports our teachers. And so we are looking at different possibilities for next year. We know that next year, when we have students back in the building, we're going to have some challenges, especially with what I call learning gaps. We know that for a lot of our kids this year, it's been a tough year, and that there have been some instances where we may have lost a step. We want to make sure that we get our students back up to speed as quickly as possible. And we are looking for a schedule which is going to allow that to happen. Another important piece that we want to mention is that next year, the district is going to implement an initiative around social emotional learning. And this has been something which is mandated by the state of Iowa. There are competencies which we have to cover with our students, as well as our teachers, because we want to make sure that our teachers, their social and emotional health is good as well. And so these competencies that we are going to introduce next year, we are looking for opportunities in the schedule that we can do this. We don't necessarily believe that saving it for professional development days, 1 day a month is necessarily the best way to accomplish this. And so we are looking at some different ways that we can support our students and our teachers with their social emotional well-being, as well as providing some extra supports around academics, again, around that encore. This year, we are doing something called Flex Time, which we are dedicating time during 5th and 6th periods, which is an extended period, to allow our teachers to work with kids around what we call some positive behaviors, around goal setting, around academic supports as well. So again, the challenge is trying to meet the needs of our kids, their academic needs, as well as their social emotional needs, with a schedule where we can accomplish these things and not feel like we are just trying to shove it in, but create some designated time and some designated spaces for this to take place. Now, I know that there's been a lot of we've gotten some feedback already. We have shared these ideas with our staff members from both Valley High School and Valley Southwoods, as well as my Principal's Advisory Council. But we decided that we needed to, and we've also shared this idea with some parents at a PTO meeting that took place, I believe it was on March 9th. And unfortunately, it took place, PTO meetings usually take place in the middle of the afternoon, right around 12 or 12:30. And so we had a first shot that we wanted to share this with parents and just get some initial feedback. But then the feedback that we got was we needed to have another opportunity to share this with parents and to share this with students and to share this with our community. So that was when we decided to have this evening. And you're going to basically see the same presentation that every other group has seen. So I believe Dr. Grassmeyer is sharing kind of the what we've learned from the pandemic and also the why behind why we are looking at a new schedule. And I don't necessarily feel like I need to walk through this, but, and I don't want to monopolize this conversation by any means. One thing that we have done is we turned off the chat and as well as muted everybody, just because we want to make sure that we present this in a way. We will unmute at the very end so that parents, so that those who in participation tonight can ask questions. But we didn't want the chat necessarily to become a distraction or to take us down a rabbit hole that will, again, detract us from what we're trying to accomplish tonight, which is truly to share the idea around 3 potential schedules for next year and then to gather feedback. One thing I do want to make sure I communicate is that we're not going to ask for any kind of votes, and we are simply sharing this information and then asking for feedback. So again, I don't want to monopolize the conversation tonight. And Mitch or Jeff, if you wanted to jump in and maybe walk through some of the whys, and then Jeff, I will allow you to walk us through the 3 different schedules and just kind of explain, what those schedules will look like.
Sure. I saw that Mr. Cooner had to step away there for just a moment, but Shane, is there anything that you wanted to add before I proceed kind of down with our examples?
Oh, I think let's get to it.
Okay. Mitch, is there anything that you wanted to add? I know you had to step away there for just a second.
Yeah, sorry. Got my daughters, so they're asking questions too. But no, I'm good. We've been able to read those types of things, and so we can move on to the schedules themselves.
Okay. So as Mr. Maxwell mentioned, what I am sharing on my screen right now is a feedback form. And this is the actual feedback form that will be shared with you in just a few minutes here that we will gather your feedback on. So as soon as we get through these examples, I will provide you that link in the chat. And I've also shortened it to a bit.ly link, which I'll present on the screen here that you can also type in your Google search bar as well to get that. So as you can see here, please view the following generic examples and provide individual thoughts on pros, cons, considerations, and questions. So what I want, as David said, we're presenting essentially 3 options here, okay? And what I want everybody to kind of keep in mind as we go through these 3 options is these are still fairly general. They're fairly vague. We don't have, class lengths fully nailed down in this. We don't have times attached to these yet. So what I want everyone to keep in mind, just from a general abstract perspective is how many block days are we going to have next year at Valley High School? Okay, as David mentioned, we have block schedule every day right now, which means there's only 4 classes each day, and we rotate even and odd. Okay, so right now, for example, we have 5 block days every week. So that's kind of on one end of the spectrum of a schedule is a block schedule. And on the complete opposite end of that would be if we had 8 period days every single day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all 8 classes meeting every day. So from 4 classes to 8, and then you have combinations kind of in between. If you've had students at Valley for the last, or Southwoods for the last year or 2, or older students that have gone through our system, you know that we used to run what we called a modified block schedule, which was 3 8-period days along with 2 block days. So that was kind of a hybrid model, which was somewhat in the middle, skewed a little more heavily towards 8-period days. So keeping that in mind, example A is what we call our AB block schedule option, and that is most similar to what we're running this year. Okay, this would be block every day, alternating even and odd. We would have 2 or 3 separate advisory SEL flex periods per week and 1 to 2 encore periods per week. As I mentioned, those details are still some things that would be decided a little bit later. Right now, we're just trying to nail down kind of how many types of days we're looking at each week. One thing that's not, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Jeff. So real quick, you'll see that 2 or 3 advisory SEL flex periods per week or 1 to 2 encore periods. Right now, we don't have any encore periods or that advisory. I mentioned earlier, we had that flex time. And again, you know, we were so close to the beginning of the school year last year when we decided to move to the block schedule that we just wanted to try to get a structure in place that we were going to be able to deliver instruction to students in the classroom. And we came up with the flex time piece because we realized that with lunches, we had to go from 3 lunches to 5 lunches. And that increased the length of time for those 5th and 6th period classes, which then created the opportunity for us to have that flex time. And the flex time kind of stands for flexible time. But we do have pieces in place that we do require teachers to deliver for our students. And again, it's mainly around something that we call tradition of the tiger, which is positive behaviors that we're trying to promote. We introduced these last year at Valley, and we really started digging in this year during flex time, as well as goal setting and academic supports that students and teachers are able to at least have some rudimentary conversations around. Okay, Jeff, go ahead.
The last thing I was going to mention is that you see early out Wednesdays here. So many of you are obviously familiar with our schedule. We dismiss at 2:35 p.m. on Wednesdays every week, and that will remain in place for next year. That is a district expectation for all buildings K through 12 is that early dismissal. So that is something that for next year will remain in place. So here's kind of a hypothetical example of what this would look like in practice. Again, very similar to what we have right now, except for that advisory period, flex time, encore, whatever you want to call it, would be pulled out from 5th and 6th period and would be its own standalone period. But as you can see here, 4 classes each day, rotating even and odd.
I think one thing to point out too on this particular schedule is I'm getting a lot of confusion about when people are making comparison. Is that what we're doing right now? Well, it is kind of what we're doing right now, but I want to clarify a couple things. We're not going to have 5 lunch periods. So that 5th and 6th block right now, that's like, it's almost 2 hours long. That won't be the case anymore. If we make this our schedule, all the classes will be able to be the same length. So it doesn't matter where they're at. And the only thing that happens is during our lunch time is you'll have that extra half hour to actually have your meal. So there's I want to clarify that it's not what we're doing now. It's different. And the other piece is right now, we're also doing an orange-black cycle. We would not be doing the orange-black cycle anymore. So what you're seeing in front of this example truly is the class periods and where things would fall. They're all equal. They're all the same amount of time. When we end Friday with the 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th, you know that the next week is going to start with your even days, 2, 4, 6. So I just want to make sure, because I've had some confusion with people trying to compare with what exactly we're doing right now to what we're proposing.
And this is not also a 4x4 schedule. This is going to be truly, these classes are going to last for the semester or the year-long classes as well. We're not going to focus on one class for 4 weeks and then go to another class. I know there's some other districts who look at a block schedule that in that format. We are not going to have that kind of a setup.
Okay. Thanks, guys. So I'm going to kind of scroll down to our next example then here. This is example B, kind of our second one. And for lack of a better name, I just made this up. I called it a 4-in-1 or a 4+1 modified block schedule option. Okay, so this is still technically a modified block, but what you can see here is that we have 2 odd days per week, 2 even days per week, and then 1 8-period day. Okay, the nice thing about this as I scroll down here in just a second is you'll see that all the days are set. For example, Monday and Thursday would always be an odd day, or whenever those happen to fall. That's been, I don't want to say necessarily a criticism, but a feedback piece that we've received this year is that kids never know which day it is. Is it odd or even? It's kind of confusing to keep straight. So this would help remedy and solve that problem. And you can still see we still want to have that advisory SEL flex period a couple times per week, focusing that on block days. And then again, same with Encore on block days. Early out Wednesdays will stay, as I mentioned before. Let's actually put 2 examples here, and I'll zoom out just a little, see if I can. It's not letting me zoom out there. Sorry. I'll try to get as much on there as I can. So this top one, as you can see, the 8-period day would fall on a Wednesday. So in this case, Monday and Thursday would always be odd days. Tuesday and Friday would always be even days. And then we would hit all 8 classes there on Wednesday. So again, it's nice to have those days kind of set every week. We know what the expectation is for classes, and there would be a little less confusion there. You can see the advisories here and Encore. That piece is still something that would be finalized later, but it would rest in there near the after the first class of the day. The other one, which is similar, but we just moved the 8-period day to Friday. So same basic setup. If you remember me talking about that continuum of block period days to 8-period days, in both of these examples, we have 4 block days in this schedule. So no matter where that 8-period day would fall, it would allow us to keep all of our days of the week consistent. So again, you know what classes you have on that particular day of the week.
Hey, real quick,
Yep,
Jeff, I want to just share one other idea, and that is one thing that we've heard has been that there's been some frustration with the block period, that some classes only get to see their students 2 days per week, others get to see them 3 days. This is a guaranteed 3 days per week. And if you look at, for instance, example B here, you will see that on Thursday, we have our even classes. And then Friday, those even classes would get to see their kids again. So 2 consecutive days. And then for the odd classes, they would see their kids on Friday, and then it would roll right around to Monday, and there would be 2 consecutive days, but no days would be during the week would pass. So odd periods would be able to see their kids Friday and then followed right back up with Monday. Even classes would be able to see their kids Thursday and then the next day, Friday as well. So just something I wanted to share. Guaranteed 3 days for all classes.
Anything else there, Mitch or Shane? Okay. So that's kind of our middle option, example B, as we stated. And then example C, this is our last one. This is our third one. And for those of you that have been around or had children go through our system, this one will be probably the most familiar to you. I know Mitch will jump in here and say that this is, whatever we end up with, even if we end up in this example C model, it will not be identical to what we had last year. So again, just the importance of that advisory and social emotional learning, we are going to do our best to insert that more often. So no matter what, even if we end up in this example C option, it will not be identical to what we had last year, but it is the most similar to the schedule that we've run previously. Okay, 3 8-period days per week, and then 2 block days, one of which is odd and one of which is our even classes there. Last year we had Encore once per week, so we would likely do that unless we could figure out a way to squeeze it in on an 8-period day. So you can see that hypothetical example here, 8-period days on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, and then those block period days on Wednesday and Thursday. Mitch, I know this was kind of your you slid the advisory in there on Thursday. So if you want to talk about that just real quick.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where, though, I mean, to be realistic right now, like if I had to tell you, like we just don't have enough of the social emotional time set aside in this calendar. We did create some opportunities between the shorter day on Wednesday and the longer day on Thursday to have 25-minute like SELs, 2 of them, and then followed by an encore. But as you pointed out, the 8-period day really does limit us in being able to like add in some extra time there, because an 8-period day typically right now has 43-minute class periods to get through all 8-period day, plus a little bit of extra time during whatever lunch period happens to be. So when you do this, those 8-period days, like let's just say lunch falls in 5th hour, 43-minute class periods, all the other periods, it's going to be like a 47, 49-minute class period on the lunch period. So they're uneven class periods, which is challenging.
Mm-hmm. David, any points to make about this before we kind of move on to the feedback form and go to our next stage here?
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing that I've heard pros and cons, and I mean, there really hasn't been necessarily, I'm focusing mainly on the kids. I've gotten just some feedback from some students, and some students, they appreciate this modified block schedule. Others really appreciated the fact that they felt like things had, that some of the pressure was off with the block schedule that we're in right now. They felt that it just slowed down. There wasn't as much homework. There wasn't as much studying that took place with this piece. But I will say that I know our performing arts, particularly our band, vocal, and orchestra teachers, really appreciate this schedule, because this schedule, they feel, gives them more contact time as well as quality time. They felt that during the blocked periods that kids they got fatigued. Their voices, their lips, they just got fatigued, playing for 80 minutes versus 43 minutes. And they felt that the quality of performances was compromised in a block schedule. And so they really did favor this scheduling option as opposed to what we're currently doing. One thing I do want to make sure that I communicate is that there seems to be this sentiment that a decision has already been made, and a decision has not been made, because that's why we are trying to gather as much feedback as we can from all of our stakeholders. In my opinion, the most informed decision is the best decision, and that's why we truly do look for and appreciate feedback that you have, that parents and students can give us. So that is exactly why we decided to have another presentation where we can just reach out to more parents and hear and get more feedback. So Shane, I want to give you an opportunity to share any thoughts that you may want to share.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, David. Somehow I've switched my screen. Can you verify that you can hear me now?
We got you.
Yep.
Okay. Well, often people ask questions about the research that's behind it. Most of anything related to the block is in I would say the late 90s to the early 2000s. When we first started looking into the research related to student achievement impact with any kind of schedule shift, the most recent research that I was able to find was a white paper, which is a meta-analysis of an amalgamation of several different researches that have been done on this topic. And if you're doing it to improve student achievement, there's very, very marginal gains associated with math and reading, which most states have national math and reading assessments that they have to participate in. And so what they did see was a lot of the whys that David had already explained. Many across the research groups, many students appreciated having 4 courses that they were focused on a daily basis versus 7 or 8, in some cases 9. They did recommend making sure that staff had a lot of support and professional development and felt ready to engage in any kind of block schedule. I would say most of the research, and this is my synthesis of it, most of the research was not real positive in terms of relationship to a full 4x4 block schedule. But as David had mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, that is not what we're considering. We are considering a modified block, so the courses would go all year long. They just meet every other day. And then I would say absolutely, just to punctuate something else that David had already mentioned, we have a significant social emotional learning content and curriculum that we need to develop and implement going into next year. And we certainly can recognize that not only while we're developing the skill set of our staff to be able to work with students, most of that comes on the heels of the relationship and the time to develop relationship with students. And we know some people are quicker and more gifted in that than others. And so we'll make sure we want to be providing that support to all the staff and students and create that opportunity. But I think, yeah, that's really all that I wanted to mention, David. If anybody's interested in seeing some of that research, I can share it with the folks. Just shoot me an email, or David, I can pass it along to you, and you can share it out with these folks if they're interested.
Thanks, Shane. So again, everyone, I think Jeff is sharing the link information in terms of where you can find that feedback form. I hope that we have conveyed what the challenge is. The challenge is we're coming out of a pandemic, and we know that we have, there's going to be some catch up that we're going to need to do with some of our kids. And we want to make sure that we have space in our schedule to allow that to happen. And that support, that encore support opportunity. We also know that we have our social emotional learning curriculum that we need to, as Shane said, develop and implement for next year. And, you know, and just in terms of helping both our staff and our students just become more socially, emotionally aware and safe within our schools, within our classrooms, within our hallways. And we're looking for a schedule which is going to allow us to accomplish all of these things. Dr. Grassmeyer and I have often said, you know, what's the driver? What's driving this need to relook at our schedule and to possibly revamp our schedule? And again, it's what's best for kids. That always is what drives our decisions. That's always the driver, is what's going to be best for kids. And again, we have to look at all students. We have to think and consider, you know, all of our kids coming from all of our different neighborhoods and all socioeconomic classes and races and countries of origin and religions and gender identity and all of those pieces which make our kids as the wonderful kids they are. And just making sure that we have a system and a schedule in place which we can best support them with all of the different things which are happening as a result of the pandemic. You know, I've been reflecting on this pandemic, and I don't even know if we are even closely aware to understanding the challenges and stress that this has caused our systems, our educational systems. Again, both academically and relationally and emotionally, socially, all of those different pieces which make a school a school. So it's 7:30 at this point, and I do want to make sure that we do allow for questions. And I think what we'll do is I need to figure out how to turn the chat back on. And Jeff, Mitch, and Shane, if you want to kind of help out, that would be really appreciated.
Yep, and everyone, I know, as David mentioned, what I have displayed on the screen here is a bit.ly link that you can type in to your browser to access that feedback form. And I will post this link in the chat here in just a minute as soon as we get that turned on. So if you want to just click on that, I will have that here in the chat in just a minute. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here right now. So we'll have that up for you as soon as we get the chat turned back on.
I think the chat is now enabled, as well as you have the ability to unmute yourselves. But I think there might be an opportunity for folks to raise their hands if you would, if you have Actually, let's just go ahead and put them in the chats. That might be an easier way for us to be able to answer questions. Okay, Mitch, is that a question that you feel like you can answer?
Yeah, at this time, like I said, for the even the odd days for jazz band and stuff like that, I'm still looking at the opportunities, even in for special education, possibly like skills resource classes, reading resource, of looking at the potential of something called skinnies. Okay, so if we get in this situation, Valley Southwoods does have more even odd, or I guess we call it orange black days than Valley does, but we would be looking at ways that we can use like a 90-minute period and actually hit two, I'm going to use skills as an example, like you could do a math resource and a reading resource in that same period. We would have to do that for something like jazz band and vocal music that currently meet in the same period, or we could also take a look at our schedule and possibly adjust those to not meet at the same time, so our kids would still have the ability to do both. So.
Okay, there's a question where it says, why are we not considering traditional block scheduling? And I'm assuming that is what we're doing right now. Is that what we mean by a traditional block? Okay, let's see here. High school teachers' opinions on the block scheduling is kind of interesting. That's a good question. We've had some teachers who do prefer the modified block. That's the 3 8-period days and then the 2 block scheduling days. There was a lot of support for that schedule, but then there are other teachers who have taught in a block schedule who actually prefer the block. And then there are some teachers who said that they did not like the current model of the block schedule, but they would be able to teach in the 4+1 or the modified block. And that's the 8-period, the 8-period day on one of the days instead of 3 days of 8 periods. Why don't we make every day just the same? I think because we do want to give the block piece, the block schedule allows teachers, especially some of our lab teachers, to go really in depth with some material, or if there's presentations in class. Having a longer period of time does allow some things to happen that just can't happen in a 44-minute period of time. So again, I'm thinking of our science classes. They can really get a good lab in. Same thing for a family consumer science class where they have to make a dish. Instead of trying to get prepped, do the lab, and then clean up within 44 minutes, it's just almost impossible. Whereas that block period of time really does allow some more in-depth things to happen in a classroom that you just can't do in a 44-minute period of time.
David, there's a question from Jill. Incorporating SEL is extremely important. Is this something every student would be exposed to at least one time a week? That would be part of the intention, is to incorporate SEL explicitly at least once a week, either during an advisory or flex, some kind of dedicated time. But I think what's also important and we've kind of just really been cursory in terms of commenting about SEL being important. There's obviously much more below the surface than that. We also recognize, and we had talked about staff and professional support for staff so they can help with every kid in every moment or every aspect of their life. But SEL is something that we all must own. Even myself as a director, when I walk the halls of Valley High School and how I interact and how I try to support kids, there's ways that you interact and ways that you support. They're friendly, welcoming, warm, invite conversation. So we would hope that SEL doesn't just happen one time a week. We hope it happens in every interaction that staff have with any adult in our building. But I really appreciate the question. What we would try to do is make sure there's something explicit happening that frequently, if not more frequently, especially in those informal interactions with staff.
Yeah, I want to address Sarah. She asked, why don't we make every day the same? Well, for us right now, if we could have had this conversation ahead of time, the district calendar actually with the early out Wednesdays causes us the situation where we can't be identical every day because we have 3:20, out times on most days, and then Wednesdays early. Now, that is something that could be looked at in the future. No matter what we do, it's possible that since it's district-wide, those early out days, if the district made the decision to adjust those to, let's just say, instead of every Wednesday, going to every other, like one Friday a month, where we take the full day. There's other ways to deliver professional development, but right now that calendar was already approved. So we didn't really have the option to make every day identical.
I'll just go down through these questions as I see them, guys. Try to do first come, first serve, but Christy Engelbert had wanted to know what the high school's opinion was on the block scheduling. Appreciate how she wants to support students and teachers. I would really say, Christy, it's a mixed bag. Sometimes I would say that folks' awareness of the unknown or the change always, even for me, would draw some apprehension at first. That's part of the reason we're bringing it to the table. The things that we didn't mention is fewer transitions in the hallway, more time in class versus being in passing period. Certainly, I would say the research also supports how a common theme for a lot of the students who were in either an AB block or a 4x4 block, what they appreciated was having fewer number of courses to have to focus on and concentrate on a regular basis. And then David mentioned it at the outset. I appreciate our arts teachers, music, band, orchestra, vocals. They've been really helping us understand the challenge that having a 90-minute vocal session would create. We'd certainly, if we did something like this on a more frequent basis, and that's something to keep in mind, we already do a modified block. If things were business as usual, we would have 2 days out of the 5 that would be that longer scheduled period. So there might be some new ideas and strategies we'd have to come up with in order to help support so the kids are not being exhausted instrumentally or vocally. So really, to answer Christy's question, it really depends on the staff member that you talk to. Some really love the idea, some not so much. Some are just kind of waiting and seeing, and they'll adapt to whatever change kind of comes our way.
Hey,
Lisa,
Shane.
go ahead.
Go ahead, Mitch.
Well, I was gonna say, Lisa brings up a question too about like teacher instruction is important. And I would argue that that is true of no matter where we're at, whether it's a multiple 8-period days or all 5 block days. I think what we're faced with this year, and I know that different teachers are experiencing different successes, but it's really difficult this year in our current model to actually still be teaching online and in person. What we've described are best practices, and I know Michelle Lettington would be on here. She would agree with that. In a 90-minute block, yes, that's more time, but we'd still be looking at like instructional practices of 15-minute chunks of things. It could all be around the same topic, but maybe it is an introductory lecture that is followed by a conversation or a dialogue amongst groups that's followed by some support information. But we kind of like to say in a block period, you should be transitioning from activity to activity every 15 minutes or so to keep our kids engaged in that. And I would say that this year that's been a little bit of a struggle when they're actually trying to balance both the online instruction and the in-person. So we would do professional development specifically around that practice.
Shane, there was a comment about research. And let's see, what data was gathered to prove that block scheduling enhances student achievement and retention? What other districts were observed and consulted?
So it'd be hard for me to kind of that's what I was trying to do earlier, was just trying to paraphrase the research. Like I said, it was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then in 2016, there was a white paper that was a meta-analysis focused only on student achievement. And that's where they found very marginal, small gains in reading and mathematics for those school districts that implemented an AB block schedule, but not a 4x4 block. So by comparison, if I remember correctly, and we did take a survey of the districts around us, and also Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, Cedar Falls. Waukee does a true 4x4 block. That's not what we're looking at doing here in West Des Moines. We're looking at an AB block. So the difference is their courses are completely done. So they might be done with algebra in the fall, and students may not have math again until the following fall. So in our AB block, kids will be in math all year long. In terms of school districts around us, it is, guys, I'll be honest with you, it's a real mixed bag. We saw junior highs. I was able to find junior highs that were doing true 4x4 blocks. I was able to find high schools that were doing 4x4 blocks, school districts that were doing an AB block, school districts that were doing an 8-period day, and some school districts that did a 7-period day with like a true tiger period or an advisory period. And that happened every single day. So I wish I could say that there was a clear pattern or a predominant scheduling type that school districts in Iowa, especially at the high school level, had selected and landed on. But I would say more, it seemed like more were in an AB block type schedule, and the very fewest were in a traditional 8-period type schedule. But if that person, my email address is my name that's on here, just put @WDMCS at the end, and I'd be happy to send you a zip file with all the research so that you can comb through it yourself.
There's no doubt that you could spend a lot of time on tweaking different options and that kind of thing. So kind of one of the things that our admin team has looked at is like, we've looked at what our current practices, we've looked at where we'd like to try to get to. We feel the options that are on the table are the best for us right now. Certainly, we're going to live and learn and continue to go forward, but we do believe that really the driving factor here is the amount of social emotional learning that needs to take place and more increased opportunities for encore, which is something that we've really missed this year. So hopefully we can get into a better space. Somebody had asked, why do we ask the students? That is our goal as well. This meeting, our students were all invited to this as well. Certainly Mr. Maxwell has the opportunity to talk directly to students that have experienced both kind of. And we, just like with the teachers, there's mixed information that comes back to us. So we do hope that everyone had an opportunity to get some answers to their questions, but certainly we're looking for your feedback, and you can do that and give that certainly in our feedback form.
Real quick, there's a question around, has anyone discussed in detail the SEL platform? No, I think it was Kurt. I'm sorry, Kyle. We are in the process. Each building has SEL teams that we are currently receiving instruction around these different competencies from district leadership. And so our goal is for secondary teams, June 15th, and then for elementary teams, June 22nd. We are going to have some in-depth summer training in terms of putting together our plans for next year. So we know the competencies that we have to teach and we have to do. And then we just have to put together that platform in terms of what that looks like. But again, we are currently still receiving training at the district level per building team.
But every building does have grade band competencies that they have to meet for social emotional learning, and that is from the Department of Ed as well.
Boy, it's hard to scroll through these questions to remember which ones have been answered.
I know. Okay, so Jill, is it a district-wide SEL curriculum? Yes, it is.
It's K-12, yep.
Yep.
Music comes up always as a concern in these conversations. And like I said, I don't think anybody would ever be expecting our musicians to be playing a straight 90-minute period. I think what we've seen in the opportunities for this year is actually I've seen our high school, both in vocal music and band, supporting each other, having the opportunity to come down and actually do smaller sessions with each other, break into smaller groups. And we know our teachers have spoken very loudly in this particular arena that we'd still have to be thinking about what our best practice would be. But I don't think anybody would ever think that a best practice would be a full 90 or 80-minute opportunity to play. That rarely happens even in a 43-minute. Lots of pauses, lots of redirect, lots of reteach, lots of small group sessions. So know that we have considered those. David, I think for the most part, the questions seem to be falling out. I think as always, if other things come up, folks, don't hesitate to email directly if there's something that you'd like to have information on. But certainly, I think it's really most important right now to spend the time in the forum and give us your opinions, the pros and cons as you see it. But thank you for coming out tonight.
So timeline, we want to come to a decision here fairly soon. We are recording this session and we want to put this on our website so that, and try to get it interpreted also and translated so that other families are able to take a look at this. I told department chairs that a goal was going to be by this Thursday, April 1st. But that very well, if we are going to get this interpreted and translated, it's probably looking like early next week. I know Dr. Grassmeyer is kind of chomping at the bit to start putting the schedule together for next year and working with department chairs and figuring out exactly what is it going to look like for next year. So like I said, I know he's kind of anxious to get this decision made. But I do feel that this is really important to make sure, again, as I said previously, that the best decision is the most informed decision. And I want to make sure that we get as many, just as much feedback from our stakeholders as possible. So this is this is a big decision that we want to make. And I want to, again, just as I said, we want to make sure we have as much parent voice and student voice and staff voice as possible. So so I'll tell you, part of the challenge is figuring out a good way to get those student opinions. I kind of want to do it outside of the classroom. I would much rather just do this in a way that kind of like this kind of a format. And, we invited kids to be a part of this tonight, and hopefully there are some who are in attendance here. And again, talking to my principal's advisory council, I feel like we'll see what tonight says. We'll see how many kids were part of tonight's presentation, and hopefully we have a strong sampling of student voice as well. Okay. All right, everyone. We'll tell you what. I do see a few more thoughts coming in. Unless you don't have any other questions, I'll stick around, and I'm sure Jeff and Shane and Mitch will be here for a little bit until again, we have the schedule until 8 o'clock for another 10 minutes. But unless you have any more questions or comments, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you taking time, again, out of your busy schedule to provide feedback on this very important decision.